Hello and welcome to the Dollhouse. My name is Kit Kowalski and I'm joined by my co-host Edie Wyatt. We're here to talk about sex, gender, and a lot of nonsense that's going on in Australia today. So, we're going to talk about incels, I think, this week.
And the manosphere, I think we do end up talking a bit about the men.
Mm.
And as much as I hate to talk about the men, they do love to think that we sit around endlessly and talk about them when we don't. But last week we had a bit of a bitch about the women. So this week we're going to talk about the changing dynamics of the manosphere and what it looks like to us as feminists because we're so popular with them. They're such big fans, the men of feminism. Mm.
It's never a good day when I get a manosphere retweet or quote tweet on one of my posts. They they don't like to think of women as being, I don't know, like fully human or having different kinds of rights. Like there is
Mm.
a lot of anti-feminist rhetoric and a lot of misapprehension of what it means for women to be seen as people who have rights as human females. They sort
Yeah.
of tend to see feminism as like a culture war against men, as women shooting themselves in their own feet. And I had a tweet. Well, I think we both retweeted some incels earlier this week,
Mm.
and one of them was like, I think a fairly, I don't know, it was a picture of a woman standing up on a train with a baby. And
Yeah.
her caption was, "Oh, no one gave me a seat," which is pretty reprehensible. Um, but also, on the other hand, you were able to stage a photograph of yourself on a train with a baby and no one giving you a seat. So I don't know. Um, and then this bloke had recaptioned it with "equality strikes again." You know, those women, they want equality. They say they want equality, but they really don't want equality. What they want is, to be treated better than men.
Yes, what
And
they want
how
is for
dare
people to
they?
society to accommodate the humans that birth the other humans.
Oh no, how dare we?
How dare you?
And there's this real, like, it's full, like, misunderstanding of what feminism is about. And I kind of sympathize with it because there is a lot of confusion within feminism about what feminism is about,
They
isn't
don't say it
there?
about disabled people, do they? They don't say, "Oh, you know, you wanted equality, you know. Now you're on the crowded train with us all, you know." It's nonsense. It's,
Yeah.
you know, we wanted we want, look, here's a radical thing. We want both equality politically,
Mm.
and we want women to be considered to have special requirements when they're growing humans inside them, and when the humans are outside the body and they need particular care in society to look after, to be carrying them around and nurturing them. Yes, we do. We also want, other people accommodated. But this is a pretty important thing because we keep making the babies. I found that I went to America the first time. My daughter reminded me of this week when she was 6 months old. And I was so surprised at how accommodating they were. Far more accommodating than, I mean, that was 25 years ago, so it was a few years ago. Maybe they're not as much now. But you'd line up to the, Empire State Building or whatever, and you get straight to the front of the line.
Mm.
Always at the airports, you get to the front of the line. Everywhere they would, if you had a baby, they always it wasn't even a big hoo-ha. It was just normal. They would, you know, much more than in Australia. And maybe because that's a bigger city, bigger population. So, it's a very sensible thing to do. Um, but yeah, it's terrible that we would want humanity to be compassionate as well as to have our equality. Imagine that.
Yeah, it's a very simple sort of equation for me. It's that, as human beings who live in society, we want the equality to be able to live our lives as we choose. Like we want some measure of freedom, and we don't want that to be impinged upon for the fact of being female.
Mm.
But when it comes to things that happen to us or that, we can only experience because we're female, we want those to be catered for. Just like when there's things that only can happen to a man, we think
Yeah,
it's fine for those to be catered for as well, right?
it's an
Like,
extreme level of vulnerability in being pregnant
yeah,
and then giving birth. I don't know if you've ever felt more vulnerable than you did when you're in labor.
yeah, it's
Um,
not a nice time.
it's not a day at the beach.
Yeah.
It's your body is going to make a human come out, come hell or high water.
Mm,
There's
mm,
no choice. Sure, you choose to have sex. Sure, you choose to, withdraw the contraception, but it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. And, when the baby's in distress, like my first baby was, it's horrific. It's it changes your whole perspective of how important your body is and how important sex
yeah.
is.
I mean, there is something that happens to women when they become mothers, and there's something that happens to men when they become fathers, right? And it's a
Yes,
different thing that happens both ways.
yes, it
And
is
you can
different.
see it,
Yeah,
like it's a moment that happens, and you can almost physically observe it.
yeah,
Um, you know, when the cogs turn and like, right, it's not just me anymore. It's me and this tiny little baby.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you do know that when you've been in a relationship for a long time, I mean, we were married 5 years before we had a child. Um, and it does change. It very much changes your perspective. Um, and changes your relationship because men do very little, really, to bring that child into the world. Very little. Uh, And I've got a good husband. He certainly looked after me. Um, he took a bit more, we ran a business together, so he took a bit more on.
Mm.
I'd sometimes have a little sleep in the middle of the day, go into the conference room and have a nap. Um, yeah, I mean, his life changed and changed radically when a child turned up in his house, screaming her little lungs out and demanding all the things. Um, but it's not the same as your whole body. All of a sudden, your body's leaking milk and you're crying, and you know, it's a whole new world, isn't it? So yeah, the world is different for men and women, and the way that is expressed in certainly the incel community and in the particular side, I think we probably should identify the side of the manosphere that we're talking about. I don't even think we're just talking about the left or the right. Um, there's a particular united front there.
I think that's something that's really important to realize is that we're not necessarily talking about like all men or left-wing men or right-wing men. But there is like a growing or like attitude amongst and they keep calling it a community of men. I almost take umbrage with that terminology
Yeah,
that everything's a community now.
yeah,
And because we live in this overarching sort of presumption of like that cultural relativism is a good thing, anything that's a community is kind of allowed to thrive
mm,
because, people are getting something positive out of a community, right?
yeah.
And anything that gets you community is somehow okay, and it's able to be like absorbed by the broader culture, um, which is not always the right presumption. Like
No,
some communities and some cultures are intrinsically harmful.
yeah. I mean, we could say the terrorism community, the Islamic extremist community. Just putting community on that word, the Nazi community.
The
I
Nazi
mean, they are a
community,
community,
the
the Nazis. We had a bit of a
that oh
dive into them
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
meet at the gym. They have a They have a central ideology that they follow.
They
They
have
do stuff,
podcasts.
podcasts, they do stuff
They,
together, they talk about things.
mm,
You know, they're identified as a group. So, the Nazi community. Um, so yeah, the community is overused a little bit in this um sphere. Angelo Caruso was his name. I don't know what his deal is. I've just got the screenshot here. He did a tweet out this week with a bunch of dots, and I'll put that up on the screen. What you see here is a clearest illustration of why things are so messed up and why it cannot get any better until this asymmetry is addressed. This guy's obviously a progressive, and the dots show all the dots are manosphere, really the podcast world,
yeah.
where you see Joe Rogan, Ben Shapiro, in the same sentence they've got Russell Brand, they've got Jordan Peterson, they've got all the blokes, and the which dominate the graphic, and then the smaller ones are the blue ones. So they're saying, for us, we're underrepresented in the podcasting world. And most of us who've been in this world for a while know why that is, because we were all watching mainstream media and it was lying to us 80% of the time. And because we're intelligent people, we thought, well, let's try and find another way. So we started listening to podcasts.
Yeah. So the mainstream media, they're lying to us all the time. And so what you go out, you think, well, hang on a minute, I wonder if everybody else thinks this way, right?
Yeah, that's right. So you start looking for most of us who are in this community, who are on this journey, at, at one point we're looking for alternative things. Many of us found Magdalene Burns. I remember finding her and going,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that chick's right
Oh,
about everything.
she
Um,
is, right? Like she was like, so right.
about
So
everything. Yep.
it's about everything.
And
I don't
even
think she
Joe
could have put
Rogan,
wrong. Yeah.
I listened to him when, a couple of years ago and
Yeah.
was thinking, yeah, I could listen to this guy for 3 hours, talk to if he had an interesting guest.
Yeah.
I did watch a few of his latest ones, and I watched the Elon Musk one, and I did get very bored. I do get bored with men, and then
Yeah.
was watching it, and I remember posting something. Are there any podcasts that aren't just men? Because they're boring the shit out of me. It's not because I don't like men. It's because I'm a woman and I'm interested in listening to other women. It's not because I'm a feminist or some sort of weird extremist. It's because the female experience is different. And sometimes we want to listen to women, and that's
Well,
okay.
sometimes when I listen to Joe Rogan, like he's got this magical format where it's just like he's so confident and it just feels like it's Sunday afternoon, everyone's had a few beers, and you're just having a chat on the lounge.
Yeah,
It's this, and it's sort of like it's really deceptive. It's deceptively relaxed. Or it's like he has done a bit of research, but also he'll just look stuff up on the fly
he's a
and
curious
comment on it
person.
and
Yeah,
put it into the conversation and
yeah,
confront the guest, but then also just give them enough rope to like go through what it is that they're talking about. And you go, oh yeah, okay, explain it to me. Explain it to me
yeah.
again.
He's a very
Um,
skilled communicator, I think.
he really is, yeah.
Yeah,
And the fact is that that gets rewarded by people listening to him. They're interested. They're interested because
yeah.
he doesn't come to it saying, right, this is the package. These are the
Mm,
sound bites. This is what we're going to get you to say. He comes to it and it feels like a natural conversation. And it
mm,
kind of to me reminds me a little bit of, when you're a kid and you're listening to the adults talk. That's
yeah,
that's what it reminds me of. You're kind of just listening to people in a relaxed environment talking
yeah,
about what their views are.
yeah. Yeah, and it does bring out, I remember years ago, one of my daughters like Kanye West, years and years ago before he went crazy. Um,
That's a lot of years ago.
yeah, well, he was with Kardashian. She watched the Kardashians,
Mm,
and um, you probably like this as well with your kids. You ask them what they like, you're interested,
mm,
you want to watch what they're watching and listen to what they're listening to. So I think he was interviewed by Joe Rogan once, and I said, I'll watch that interview and see what. And I said to her, honestly, sweetie, I think he's mentally ill. I I tried to listen to him. I tried to understand what he was saying, but it was really clear then to me that he was a very confused man,
Mm.
um, very overconfident in his own genius, without having any real structure to back it up. Um, so you're right, he does give people that sort of rope, where they can hang themselves. And the left at the moment are so paranoid about having to listen to people speak, which is what has happened with Elon Musk buying Twitter and letting radicals like us speak. Although you weren't banned, I don't think, from Twitter, but
I
so
never
many of
got
us,
banned.
good girl, so many of us did.
Yeah.
Um, and largely that was because we were strategically targeted, and mass reported based on corrupt rules. So the problem we've seen is that we have had some of these creeps on Twitter. I mute or block them. I try and block if they're really dangerous sort of types. I do block them. If they're just pests, I mute them usually. Muting the manosphere is not so easy because if you turn this map, which I did, um, from Republican versus Democrat into male versus female, um, it really does show uh, the kind of dominance that men have in the podcasting sphere. Um, they really are. Uh, that experience I had where I said, "Oh, has anyone got a good women's podcast?" It's for politics. Of course, you can hear women's podcasts, but a lot of them, when you go to Mamma Mia or, those
Mm.
women we talked to last week, and I'd rather bloody put acid in my ears. They're so dull
Mm.
and captured. Um, so what I meant was interesting women, which is really difficult to find. Not impossible. I think
Yeah.
Megan
Um,
Murphy does a good job. She talks to a few interesting people. Um, yeah,
I think so. But they just don't have the audience just isn't there. Um, so it kind of reminds me of like the comments of the ABC chair Kim Williams about Joe Rogan. So he made some comments a couple of months ago where, he's basically called him a hate monger and introduced this idea that um, we need our own Joe Rogan, like, or the left needs their own Joe Rogan, that somehow, like, public attention is a public good that needs to be shared out equally. And if Joe Rogan, so, we know what's happened. We know the mainstream media is not trustworthy, and that's how Joe Rogan's managed to get a foothold in like the public attention. Um, But there's this idea that, oh, well, because he's done that, then that means the left also needs to have one of those. That it's not
yes.
fair. It's not fair that the left
Oh,
doesn't
can you
have one.
imagine the ABC saying that? I was watching what's that guy, the man Pete, is his name Pete Murray? I know that's a singer, but the guy on Sky News late at night, the chubby guy, um, don't know.
I know.
He talked about the manosphere last night because it caught my attention. It was just on accidentally from something else. Um, and he did a review of all the podcasts. Um, was it Pete Murray? And the ABC, and he did this to Australian podcasts, are absolutely dominant on in podcasts because they get paid to do it, right? And they double dip. They double dip on everything. Mia Friedman was one of them. Paul Murray, sorry. Um, and the ABC were disproportionately represented podcasts in Australia. So they are our Joe Rogan, but people don't want to listen to them. They're actually are our Joe Rogan, but they don't have, what does this thing say? They don't have 39.9 million followers. because they're boring as shit and they're captured. I
Yeah.
hate to
And
state the obvious.
so like this idea that like public attention is a public good that needs to be evenly distributed. So we started off, we wanted to talk about incels and the manosphere. And there's a parallel here with incels. And
Mm.
incels are a subculture of men who they call themselves involuntary celibate. And the idea is that they're going to be forever unable to attract a woman because they're such low quality male specimens.
Yeah,
Um, but again, they treat the attention of women or the sexual access to women as though it's a public good,
it's a
as
right.
though,
Yeah, they have a
you know, if
rights
if there are
framework there.
10 men and 10 women, well, that's enough to go around. And
Yeah, they have a right to have at least one
that,
of those women.
that they have a right to have, and not only that, but they have a right to have the best of the women.
Yes, and they have that. Is it 80-20 rule or something where they say that 20% of women.
Now,
um
80% of women are attracted to 20% of men.
that's right, yeah. Which
But
is
it
not
goes,
nonsense. I mean, some of it's just nonsense. Not all of it's nonsense.
but it goes the other way as well, because like they want to have the best women as well, right? They don't
Yeah, they don't want
like
the
they
daggy
don't
old
they don't
ugly
say, "Oh, look,
girls.
I'm a two, I want a two." They're like, "I'm a two, I want a nine."
That's right. And they think they're the first people to notice that attractive women go for attractive men. Like that this is a
Yeah.
real revelation, and that some attractive women also marry men for money. Um, this is and that women find powerful men attractive.
Or
These are
women
things that
find,
the incels community notice. We notice them, but they notice them as if they're a problem. They're a violation against the principles of equity. So some of their rhetoric, despite the fact that they're often put on the right, is quite left wing, and a lot of them are quite left wing, especially to do with embracing the trans agenda. And we'll go into that. There's a couple of tweets that I got into this week. Um, Andrew Wilson, um, who's some slob, got 85,000 followers. Christian, why are they always Christians? It has occurred to me the reason why women hate incel so much is because it's the one man club they can't infiltrate due to the nature of what it is. Do you feel
see,
like you really want to be in the man club of incels?
well, there are women incels. There are femcells, and there are women in the incel club.
Yeah, I don't know. I've
So,
never known a woman who couldn't get laid. I've known celibate
wow.
women because I'm a Christian and there's a lot of celibate
Yeah.
women in the church. But
No,
oh,
there
maybe,
are
maybe.
actually there are women in the incel community again.
Oh,
And they describe like just being groomed and abused and treated really badly. So,
that's a surprise. Yeah,
yeah,
their
like,
view of women is a commodity. But it's also you see them. There's a beardy guy here, Beardson. He seems like a bit of an insult. Christian again. Dear, dear God. And there's a woman here, right-wing woman, who's put a picture of herself. She's an attractive woman, and I'll put it up. I mean, she's objectively attractive. I don't know whether there's some question about this. And she's got here 28% Irish, 100% MAGA. So she's obviously a right-wing woman. Um, and she's in a green dress. And Beardson has retweeted saying 128% Irish, 72% fat. And you'll see this with the incels. They pick out a really attractive woman. There was another one I saw the other day. I didn't share it though. Conventionally attractive woman, blonde hair, beautiful teeth, perfect nose, all the slim things. And they're saying, oh, why these women think they're so beautiful. Well, and this guy's this ugly looking guy. And it's a sort of a very common theme that you see on the
mm,
internet where they do go after really attractive women, and they call them ugly. Um, And of course, everyone in the comments here is saying, just say you're gay, you're an incel. And a lot of the blokes will come and say, you're kidding? That's a very attractive woman. Is there something wrong
Yeah,
with you?
it comes down to this idea that, women are a commodity, like women
Mm.
are a resource, and whether or not you think that that resource rightfully belongs to a few um, chads, as they call them, like
Yeah,
the
that's right.
the
Yeah.
attractive, the
Attractive man.
attractive, successful men, the
Yeah.
20%. Either you think they rightfully belong to that group, or you think that that resource should be socialized and that you should all have a timeshare on this beautiful woman and her body, and you should be able to, I don't know, maybe enter a lottery or something and get a
Oh,
beautiful girlfriend. Um, it all comes down to this idea that, like, women are not humans with agency, right? So before there were incels, there used to be, like, the internet used to groom young men into pickup artist communities. And so this is kind of like before incels, there were pickup artists. And this was, instead of
oh.
resigning yourself to being involuntary celibate forever, it was teaching men how to trick women into relationships and teaching them kind of phony science and psychology techniques of like how to seduce women or how to trick them into having a relationship with you.
Andrew Tate does a bit of
Um,
that. Isn't that some of what Andrew
yeah,
Tate does?
I think so. Yeah. And like there were sort of somewhat discredited scientists like neurolinguistic programming, and but this idea that an ordinary, even an ugly guy can do these steps and he can score with a woman who is above his attractiveness level. And like it's so dehumanizing, the idea that we all have these attractiveness levels, and that like mating or getting a relationship is a game of strategically trying to outperform other males.
Yeah, and there is that
Um,
dynamic. I've got a friend who's a former model. I mean, I don't see her very often, but anymore. But kids went to school together. Gorgeous woman. All the things tall and even into her 40s, just stunning woman. Her husband's kind of short, um, not revolting, but certainly not anywhere near her. And people would remark on it constantly,
mm.
assuming he was really rich or, something like that.
Or
Um,
has some assets that we don't know
uh,
about.
it was, yeah,
I
that's right. Maybe he's got a big knob. Um, but they would say it all out loud in front of her. And I would think, oh, we were thinking it, might have been thinking it. But you'd never say it because it's not because we live in the real world, right? You marry someone because you fall in love with them. I mean, this is the other extreme, that you live in a world where you meet someone and all the stars go and you fall in love with them and you have a real connection with them and you say, okay, let's build a life together. That's what normal people do. And
well,
generally you're about the same in attractiveness, I think. That's
generally, yeah, there's
it's a general,
couples, yeah.
because sex is part of it. Sex is you find someone attractive. And what you don't find attractive, and we've both watched Adolescence this week as well, if we're going to talk about that, is Creepy Men. And that was a sort of was it a three-part series or four?
Or
Um, where they did show there was a few scenes where there was men who were creepy and made women uncomfortable. One was in the last episode, I think, where there was a guy in the psych ward there who worked there who was just making that woman uncomfortable. And every woman knows how that feels. That you're in a workplace or you're in a place and there's a man, it doesn't matter that he's unattractive because you don't care. If you go into a workplace, you're not looking for a good looking man. It's that he makes you feel uncomfortable. And I think that that's what these guys are. I think that they're not necessarily unattractive. They're not good. They're
It's
weird.
socially awkward. Like,
Yeah. And women respond to
yeah.
them funny. And so they live in this world where the women are all responding to them and they're making up these grand theories about why women don't like them. And there's this one guy who responds to this guy who um, talks about the incel community. And he says, why would women want to infiltrate the incel community? It's not like any woman would want to actually F any of them right. This guy comes back and says, control is why they go into male spaces and drama, not sex. And I've seen this a few times where they take away the sex of women as well. They take away the sexuality of women, that women actually seek out men because they want a sexual relationship, which is nonsense. Of course, women want sexual relationships. Of course, and I said to him, spoken like a man who's never made a woman orgasm, these men, they don't, they've never had a relationship with a woman that's mutually sexually beneficial. They, and it's a dialogue, a discourse. We were talking about it before, and you said it's a bit similar to some of the other radical feminist discourses where they kind of they put power into a relationship and they take out other factors of humanity.
Yeah, I think it reminded me quite strongly of a documentary we watched. I think you and I watched it last year, called Angry Women. And it was about Sheila Jeffries and um, Julie Bindel, Linda Bellos, like radical feminist, political lesbians from, and it was
Particularly
from
the
the
70s. Yeah.
80s, I think this
Was
particular
it?
one
Yeah.
was. Yeah, like women who basically, they sort of really strongly bought into radical feminism,
And the separatist
into
movement.
separatism, moved
Mm,
into lesbian radical feminist houses.
mm,
Um, some of them changed their lives completely. And they bought into this idea of the power dynamic between the sexes in
mm,
various ways. Like some of them, um, in ways that they could integrate into a sustainable life, right? And some of them in ways that seem a little far out. So there's a quote in at the end of it where Sheila Jeffries is saying that she expected that there would be like a revolution almost with men on one side of the picket line and women on the other.
yeah.
And she kind of still thinks that is possible and still thinks,
You can
reflecting
tell
back
that.
on that
Yeah.
time, that that's
Yeah.
going to happen or that should happen or that's necessary to happen to liberate women from patriarchy.
Yeah. We
Um,
get this
and
idea that we're coerced into our relationships. Yeah.
yeah, and that sort of reminds me of like the incel narrative is that there isn't just a relationship between men and women as like a sexual selection relationship between men and women. Everything is thoroughly drenched in a power struggle, in a struggle for dominance. And both of these cultures see that, there is one side that has the power and the other side is completely lacking in power.
Yeah.
And
We heard this with
like,
Benjamin Boyce a bit as well.
yeah,
I think he entered into that dialogue as well, that women have this tremendous power.
we hear that all the time. Like,
Yeah.
we have like the pussy power. If women
Yeah.
want something to happen, they should just refuse sex and
Yeah.
men will crumble. Men and women's sexuality is quite different. Like we have different sexual selection strategies,
Hmm.
right? And they make a big deal out of these strategies.
Yes.
Um, and and part of it is this idea that they'll never get picked. And
Yeah.
what I think can be so dangerous about this idea that you'll never get picked is that you've got no reason to behave yourself. You've got no reason to play the game.
And the coercion's your
Um,
only option.
yeah, the
But
coercion
in a world of
or
free choice, it's like they make a romantic idea that before feminism, before women had choices, they were coerced. They had to have, you have this bloke. They did the pairing up with family things and stuff. That was a utopia. But
Mm.
since women have got their rights, and we hear this all the time on the internet, one version and another of it, since women have got their rights, everything's gone to shit.
Yeah, because they'll never get picked, they don't have any, they don't even need to play the game. So like you and I know from our experience of like walking on this earth for the time that we have, that just about everyone, pretty much most people can find a sexual partner, right? It's some people can't, some people don't really try, but if you give it a go, you can pretty much find someone.
And not just for
And
sex. Usually,
like you
most
can
people,
find
someone who you
to,
can be with, you can be a companion. You choose a person that you're sexually attracted to, but really, you also want to be able to put up with them.
yeah, and it's like if you actually give it a go, you can find somebody to
Yeah,
share your life with.
yeah.
And I
You
wanted to
kind of got to have a
say,
shower and do your hair, and
but you have to play. You have to
that's,
like actually put your hat in the ring. You have to
yeah.
say, right, I'm available. I'm going to go out on dates. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say no. I'm going to figure some things out.
Shocking upon shock upon shock. Even after you get married, some of us still choose to do our hair and have a shower and
And not get the sack.
maintain ourselves in a way that's reasonable. And some of these guys don't. They don't make any effort. They're very creepy individuals. Um, they they don't make any effort to try and make themselves get themselves a bit of personality to bring themselves up from maybe a 3 to a 5. Um, which is a huge advantage.
Well,
A lot of women don't actually go for looks. I mean, this idea that they have in their head that women go for only looks is not true.
or
I
that
mean,
there's, yeah, like I think, one of my favorite types of man is like really the ugly, charismatic man.
yeah,
Like you look at, meet them and you're like, oh, you're very unfortunate looking.
yeah,
But you talk to them for a few minutes and you're thinking, oh, can we hang out again? Let's go
yeah,
for coffee. I want to hear more about your interesting life, your interesting views on things, your appreciation of art or poetry, or,
mm,
your ability to build things. You've got a great personality. You're a great person.
yeah,
Um, and I have a friend and he says, if the women don't find you handsome, then let them find you handy,
yeah.
right? So,
Be useful. Yeah,
be useful, like
yeah,
compensate, right? And he gets is quite successful with
yeah,
women. Um, so if you put your hat in the ring, then you will get some kind of success. But there's
yeah,
this culture of these young men, and they've given up before they've started. They're
yeah.
socially awkward. There's a high instance of autism, of vulnerable narcissism, and of just like chronically online
Mm,
behavior.
yeah. Which is what came out in that adolescence, and a lot of people didn't like it, but I thought it was very well done. Um,
Yeah, so
and
yeah.
there's this idea that, and that's what I just was reading someone who did a podcast um, on incels, and her claim is that there's a moral panic over incels. Her name is Nam Cates. She's not around on the tweets anymore or anything or on social commentary. But I listened to one of her podcasts with a incel type guy who ran an incel server. The line is that they're just misunderstood, right? Turns out one of the guys she interviewed later died in mysterious circumstances and was the architect of a kind of digitally printed gun um, that had taken the interest of a great deal of terrorists. So, our fear about these guys, and they say, oh, it's a moral panic. There's a reason for women to be cautious of men who are misogynistic, who create misogynistic communities, and who talk in these ways about women because it is deadly. Misogyny, there is a link between violence against women and misogyny. And we saw the, of course, I don't think there's a proven link in the Bondi stabbings. But there is some, and that guy named Joel Cauchi, that's a Maltese name. So there's a whole bunch of left-wing talk. I just read a few articles about it. And they're saying, oh, they said he was of Middle Eastern appearance, but he's a white guy. Um, last time I checked, um, it's still the Mediterranean, isn't it? So, they get obsessed with race, they get obsessed with narrative, but this is real stuff here, and the ABC couldn't be less interested in it. They're so busy with their trans agenda, and the men who put dresses on are absolutely not creeps at all, that they take no notice of these emerging narratives that are happening among young women, young men, sorry. And I think that show that on Netflix was, I think it treated it very respectfully. I don't think it was too hyped up or moral panicky.
Well, it's an interesting question about like whether it is a moral panic. Because the problem of young single men is like it's something that humanity, like any society, needs to come to terms with and needs to solve. Like, what do you do with young single men, right?
They're like the
Um,
monkeys, aren't they? You seen
well,
those documentaries of the monkeys where the alphas get all the women and
yeah,
the young monkeys get it, and then they start sexually assaulting the children, is what happens with the monkeys. But we're not monkeys, so
yeah, right. Like, so in Mormon communities, right, they have like this thing called the Lost Boys, where they eject young men from the society because they have polygamy. So like the old men basically scoop up all the women, all the available women are taken.
yeah,
And the boys that are growing up, they're superfluous to the needs of the community. And they
it's what
just
the apes
literally
do.
let them go. They push them
Mm.
out. And
And it makes them very angry.
yeah,
And I think that's what these people, the incel sympathizers are saying. Oh, well, we don't want to make them angry. And the parallels here with the trans stuff is very clear, particularly this week. We've seen a couple of the sexologists come out and, talk about things. Um, you know, this idea, well, if we enter into dialogue with them, it's going to be better for everybody, and we don't judge them.
well, well, if you enter into dialogue with them, then you're kind of giving credence to this condition. Like you are
Yeah,
saying, yes, you have a legitimate claim that as a young man, you are dispossessed from society. Yeah, that, you're sort of, if you enter into dialogue with them, then you are actually giving credence to their claims, that
yeah,
like being an incel is real. But, what we know from our experience is that, um, eventually young single men will turn into like slightly older men, and they should be able to find someone and settle down, right?
yeah.
And that would be
It's a problem
the
for men to solve. Let me just say that too.
yeah.
Like for men to mentor them and bring them into the realization that women are not a resource for them to be
But
used.
part of the issue here is that like men are mentoring them, that older men
That's right.
are mentoring them, and
Yeah,
they're mentoring them into this like really weird
yeah,
worldview. And it appeals to the sort of more literal thinker, the more like autistic stereotype, because you've got the classifications. You know, are you this impossible stereotype, or are you one of us loser rejects? And the classifying of people and the classifying of situations and the classifying of behavior and sorting things out and really fitting real life into an ideology and retreating from real
yeah,
life. And I think it's young men because like adolescence is this really vulnerable time where you stop being a child. Um, you're the child disappears, the child dies. And in
Yes.
order to become an adult, you have to leave behind childhood. And it's a
Yeah.
very scary, it's a very vulnerable, it's a very difficult time. And
It's
it
frightening,
shouldn't be,
and they're thinking, how am I going to fit into this
yeah,
group?
how I don't want to be like my dad or like my mom. I don't want to be, I can see that my parents have an imperfect relationship. I don't want to be like that. I want to be like something else, or I, you know, feel inadequate as a child.
Mm. Or that I
Um,
do want to be like that, but I don't feel like I got the skills.
yeah.
And let's
And
talk about also the market influence here, because incels, we talk about the monkeys and the Mormons. Sorry, Mormons, I don't mean to say that you're like monkeys, where they cast them out. Now, these cast out men are a market as well for podcasters. This guy who was being interviewed ran a forum for these guys. People like Benjamin Boyce, I've mentioned him and his narrative about women having the power. Guys like James Lindsay, I mean, they might be married men, they might not be in the incel community, but they sell a narrative, and these guys are subscribers, right? They're a subscriber base. So they're still, despite the fact that they're weird and awkward, they're still probably computer programmers. They earn a decent income. They've made themselves useful to the market, so they have financial ability to actually become a consumer. And so they start to consume these narratives, which is what Andrew Tate's about, right? He sells a narrative. I'm this powerful person. I'm the hero of all the things. And I was reading one of the articles about um, these guys, these ASIO guys. They monitor the incel forums after this stuff. And when Joel Cauchi murdered those women, he became a bit of a hero until they found out he had been a prostitute for some reason, an escort. So he they were talking about they're calling the police officer that killed the man a bitch, developing these narratives. So there are forums that would be the most extreme, but there'd also be a general, broader population that would be a subscriber base.
well, um, and even if it is like some of the comments are extreme, they're happening online. So like in a space that's like divorced from the real world. And again, we see this with like the trans phenomenon. It's something it's online, and it's this self-reinforcing, self-feedback, positive feedback culture where someone
Mm.
posts a meme and like, it's an edgy meme, and then someone posts something that's even edgier. And, there's twists and turns on that. And then it kind of gets into this like really depraved behavior that everybody's like, oh, that's so funny. Because it's part of the discourse and the dialogue. But to an outsider, it just seems like so depraved and so wrong. So there might be like just really casual jokes about, harming women. And
Yeah.
some of the people, they don't mean it. Like most of them don't mean it. Most of them are just kind of triggered, and they're stuck in this thought loop of, oh, that references this and references that and references this. And it goes back to something that was funny, and we're all just part of this joke. But there'll be a significant number of people who don't kind of get that, or they come in too late and they don't recognize that it's all just part of a joke. And they think that the funny thing is saying we should harm women. And that's where, this culture and this community kind of does become a bit dangerous, because everyone is saying the same thing, and you don't know who's taking it seriously and who's actually just, laughing along because, it was part of something that was funny, like, 3 turns ago. Um, And we have seen, there's actually violence coming out of the incel culture. So so I think the radical feminists of the 80s were somewhat prescient in some ways, like that there are incel terrorists. There are men in the United States who go out and they murder people,
Mm.
and they see it as part of like the incel insurrection of like these
Yeah.
lonely men getting their own back on society
Mm.
because something has been preemptively taken away from them by themselves, right? But they blame other
Yeah.
people.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a verifiable fact that rejection does lead to men to murder, because we know that the most dangerous time for a woman in a domestic violence situation is when she leaves.
But
Um,
yeah, but what we're seeing here is like the situation where there is no relationship. There was no relationship.
no, there's a
The
perceived rejection though.
and the rejection is from all women,
Mm.
and it's the rejection of a future relationship that can never happen. So it's like it's so
Yeah.
generalized,
Mm.
and it like everything when when you believe such a big lie, like any behavior is permissible.
Mm.
And that's where it does become like quite difficult and quite dangerous. And
Yeah, and
the fact is, it's all happening online. So you have like these really intense thoughts and it never gets reality checked.
no.
Yeah.
And I think in the movie or in the series Adolescence, that the narrative was that the story was, the plot line was that the girl had was a pretty girl, and she'd teased him and she'd rejected him.
Mm.
He thought he could get her because she had some half naked photos shown around the school. He thought, oh, she's vulnerable. She might go to the fair with me or whatever it was. And she rejected him and said, no, I'm not that desperate. And girls can be cruel. I think, I've got a couple of pretty girls. And I remember saying to my daughter once, be careful. I don't even remember the context, but there was some creepy guy after her, and she wasn't very kind in her response. Um, and it made me a little bit frightened. As much as I'm empowering women, don't pander to them. I said, just try and stay away from him. Because I do remember a situation. I was a bit like that. It's hard to believe I was a mouthy young woman, but I was. And some guy was mouthing off one day, and I just told him to F off. And I was about 14. And we're drinking on a pier down at Shorncliffe, which is a kind of beach at night, a bunch of bogans. Uh, and he picked me up and he dropped me on my head, just
Mm.
as just as easy as that. And I remember it nearly knocked me out. It was on concrete. And I just, I almost saw, first time in my life, I think I saw stars. Um, and I remember he was just saying, you know, um, watch it. And the other girl said, you got to be careful. He's very dangerous. And so to tell women, and just to back to this woman calling it a moral panic, that they shouldn't worry about groups of men who frame women's rejection as hate, um, and frame women's sexual choices as hate. It's not a right thing to say.
Yeah.
Maybe women will get a bit. They're certainly not. I mean, the ABC hardly even talk about it. They're so busy talking about how the trans-identified men are so stunning and brave that they've got no clue. They don't seem to have any clue.
Well, I think this is the thing. This is where it does somewhat become a moral panic, right? Because, and I'm going to have trouble sort of framing this, but we have these ideas of, the power struggle between the sexes, and we have these ideas of, because we have this popular mainstream feminism, there is a lot of focus on girls and picking up girls and promoting girls can do anything, girls can do this. You can shave your legs if you want to, buy this razor. And there's very little attention on boys and what boys can do. And boys are just kind of, along for the ride, right? And, what happens when you like ignore a vulnerable population? The wheels fall off. You leave these boys to their own devices. You put them
Did you
online, you
see
give
the
them
manosphere
access
square
to.
circles? How many of them are
I'm, talk-
male?
I'm talking about boys, right? I'm talking about boys,
Yeah,
young boys. Like the wheels fall off for some of these boys. They're
yeah,
online and they have, like, they're not, we're also talking about these like cotton wool kids that they're not going out into the real world having real interactions and finding out how things actually work,
yeah.
right?
Well, they are having less
There is
sex.
ample,
That's been studied, hasn't it?
yeah,
Kids having young
yeah.
people having
And they,
less
they're
sex.
they're on their phones, like they're in face-to-face situations and still on their phones
Yeah, the pornography
talking to each other.
is a
Yeah.
is a real problem with boys. Yeah,
But look, there's a guy I follow on Instagram, and he calls himself, I think, the guy with the ick list, right? And what he does is he looks at content where women say something about men gives them the ick, right? So like they reject men who do X, Y, Z. And he's just got this list of like hundreds of things that quote men are not supposed to do. And so you can look at that content and you can build up this picture that says to you, nothing I can do is right. Nothing, nothing is right. Nothing will make me right. Everything is going to cause me to be rejected. Um, so, and then we put these guys in these vulnerable communities and we say, oh, it's a community. We're just going to study it. We're not going to pass judgment on whether or not it's bad or good. Where they're being groomed by older men who are telling them this is how relationships work. You've got to get ahead, you've got to strategize, you've got to lie, you've got to cheat. um Women will always reject you, and we
yeah.
kind of
You've got to
wonder, oh,
deceive them.
why does it why and then this whole thing, this edifice has been built, and then the ABC will come along and they'll say young men are gathering online in forums, and guess what they're saying? And suddenly, there will be a moral panic. And I think um, it will be, it's not the way to respond to this. Like,
No,
then, there'll be a focus. There'll be a focus on boys. What can we do for boys? What can we do for boys now? Yeah, girls get everything. There'll be this admission that, we've
mm,
had so much focus on girls and it's not fair. And we
yeah,
need to, have equity in the focus. We need to bring it back to boys now.
yeah. Well, there
Whereas
is a
what
crisis
is
of
wrong? What is wrong with just
fatherhood.
treating boys and girls like humans who are both human but of different sexes and who have slightly different developmental pathways through adolescence? Like, and that they're both human and that we can respect and honor and like bring them into the strategies for adulthood, instead
Yeah,
of
it's a nice idea.
problematizing the behavior.
Yeah. Well, some of it is bad behavior, and some of the narratives do kill women.
Well, there is that.
That's the truth of it.
Yeah.
And there is a truth that men who get rejected by women do sometimes get violent. We had that situation here um, with Hannah Baxter, and he murdered her and her children,
Yeah.
set them on fire.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a bunch of those situations that happen over and over again. And she decides to leave, and he does this thing. So there is a correlation between attitudes about women and violence against women.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think it does exist, but the way it was treated, I thought in the film was pretty good. In the show, it's obvious the guy, the copper who runs it, he was in Top Boy. Did you watch Top Boy?
No,
I
I've never
really
heard of
like
that.
Top Boy. It's a British sort of gritty. He was a drug dealer in that. Nice, really nice looking man. Um, and that was not missed. You know, the boy asked him if he did well with girls, and he said he did all right. And it's very clear that he's a very good-looking man. And his son was in it, and it was clear that his relationship with his son had gone off. And it was a wake-up call for him to become closer to his son and to talk to him. Take it, they go out for chips in the end of that episode. It's all in one shot too. Every episode's in one shot, which is quite stunning visually, and technically impressive. Um, so I think, some of those themes are important. And one thing it showed me was that good television is possible. There's so much terrible television out at the moment. Sometimes it astounds me how bad it is. And
Well, I mean,
I
can
thought
I
it was
just say,
intelligent.
that I've been binge watching Meghan Markle's show.
Oh, so ashamed of you.
You should be. It's horrible. Uh yeah, you can sort of sympathize with the view of the manosphere just a little bit. Like this woman is she's
Yeah.
not that talented.
No.
Um
There's stupid
but
women and there's stupid
it's
men. I mean, that's a
yeah.
reality of the world.
Yeah, but I don't for a minute sort of think that she's gotten where she is because of her sex, right? I think there's a whole bunch of other factors that have gone
Yeah.
into it beyond before the fact of her being like a reasonably attractive female.
Well, you're
Um,
probably not going to be as successful as an actress if you're not as attractive, and that is a factor.
yeah, I think she was kind of like the minimum attractiveness for television, really.
Yeah, she's an attractive woman. She's not stunning. She's not like, like Angelina Jolie or, a woman where you look and think, wow, she's really attractive.
And
Um,
she does project she projects like a very deferential figure of femininity.
mm,
She projects like, she's very focused on the home and on the guest and on, the experience of others.
yeah.
Um,
Some people have
but and
called her like a pound shop Martha Stewart, and I think that's a terrible insult to Martha Stewart, who was you know, really the founder of lifestyle TV and of the lifestyle industry, really.
Mm.
Amazing woman. I mean, had a rotten husband and built, I mean, I know she ended up in the clink, but you know,
But
in
she
terms
came
of
back from
that,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
a very intelligent woman, not only attractive, but really knew how to do stuff, and made a home and made that lifestyle. She was she was a lifestyle guru before lifestyle gurus existed. She was the founder of that stuff. So to call even mention her in the same sentence as Meghan Markle, which I just did, is a sin. Sorry, go on. Tell me how terrible she is.
Well, so I've been reading a bit of incel content, and part of the criticism that they have is that women are rewarded for um, for like projecting an insincere view of femininity. And I think that's exactly what you've got with Meghan Markle. Like she projects this view of like the traditional wife. She's deferential to the husband, deferential to the kids, stays at home, nourishes the chickens, blah, blah, blah. Um, but it's insincere. Like it's her
Yeah.
business. It's her business that, she's being filmed while she's doing it. She's projecting this view of what women should be, but like it's not correct. It's not real.
No, there's no
And that is
foundation.
like,
I
and
don't
that
have
is
any
like, there are
problem with
some.
making money out of it if it was like, for instance, Nigella Lawson, another one who's
Mm,
made an absolute fortune out of being, domestic goddess. Gorgeous woman, knows how to cook. When you watch her, I mean, I think she originated the idea of food porn. When you watch her cook, you think, oh, gee, I'd like that. I'd like to be eating that food. You can tell she loves it, that she
mm.
really cooks with love. I'm a good cook. Um, and I cook with love. And I've taught my children to cook with love. And the Lebanese, my husband's Lebanese, they, food in Lebanon is the language of love. They routinely, pour their heart into food in a way that's sometimes unhealthy.
I
Um,
thought cooking with love just meant not measuring.
yeah, no, I measure when I bake, which is not, I'm not a great baker. People who are sort of often fairly passionate cooks sometimes aren't great bakers. I had a neighbor who was a terrible cook, but she was a great baker. She always baked really well because it's so much more precise. She made a great
Yeah.
sponge.
It's very, very scientific. Yeah.
Mm,
But, that's kind of yeah. Um, so I think like on the one hand, there are like valid criticisms that come out of like that incel narrative,
mm,
um, about how, girls are, and, I think they're almost feminist criticisms, like that girls are rewarded with popularity for being insincere, for
mm.
playing the victim card, for, you know, looking for sympathy, for sort of pretending to be
Yeah,
deferential, but being conniving and blah, blah, blah. Um, for like manufacturing their beauty, right? And also a feminist criticism that
yeah,
women are rewarded for this
yeah.
surface projection of femininity.
They kind
Um,
of criticize us for our own
but when it
aggression.
comes down to it, yeah, right. But when it comes down to it, like there's a little bit of a difference in that, like the incel people blame women and they think that all women and all girls have this like original sin of being conniving to extract resources from men,
Yeah.
that they themselves are a resource that needs to be controlled and managed and either concentrated in the hands of a few men or
Mm.
socialized so that we can all have one.
There's
um,
too much power in the analysis.
and then
I'm a big fan of putting power in analysis, but it's like the radical feminist, too much power in the
it's
analysis.
yeah, and it all falls apart when you actually have a human conversation with someone.
Yeah.
And so I see like how, the podcast, you're talking about the podcasters who, want to hear what they have to say or want to interview them and humanize them. But that conversation has to be a process of actually like undermining the ideology. If you just give a platform to the ideology, well, what have you done? You haven't actually achieved anything.
That's right. It's like the
Um,
Blanchard thing,
yeah,
and the other guy that I criticized, what was his name? Bailey, Mike Bailey.
yeah,
Um, sure, people say, oh, they're helpful.
yeah.
They're just describing what's happening. They're not critiquing it. And in fact, they're defending their right to be in our spaces and to perform femininity as a legal entity. No, no, piss off. And this week, I think there was a AGP scene on a popular television show. Can you remember what it was? And Blanchard weighed and
Oh,
I
this was there's
I
like this
made a
classic scene
pithy.
in a television series. I've never heard of it before, but apparently it's very popular, called White Lotus. And one of the characters just goes forth with a full-on description of a developing AGP, a fetish. Um, and it's all over the internet now. Everybody's sort of looking at it going, oh my God, like AGP has gone mainstream.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they got a bit excited about it, didn't they? Ray Blanchard
yeah,
said since 2003, political trans activists and their allies have done everything they could to prevent the world and the concept of autogynephilia from entering the public awareness. I mean, he invented that word, and I'm not a big
yeah.
fan of it. And yet, with excruciating slowness but apparent inevitability, it's doing just that. And I made a comment which was reasonably popular, not as popular as his. Maybe we could put all your messed up weirdos on an island with all the different clothes they want, and you could go and study them, and you can all leave women and children the F alone. We all have our fantasies, I guess. So I got a few incels to the park there. Trans activists and incels to me, they're all the same. One guy said, mind your own business, Karen.
Oh, burn. Yeah.
Yeah, they love to
Because
call women who criticize men Karens.
well, there is obviously there is a big overlap between incels and the trans movement as well.
We're going to talk about
There's
transmaxing.
Yeah, yeah. So there's like there are some incels who they have this rationale that they're never going to be popular with women, and so what they do is they feminize. So they have this idea that women are treated so much better than males, and so what they need to do is feminize and become females, and then they'll be treated better, um, whatever that means, as a female than as a male. And then, of course, they also have access to becoming a lesbian, and all of the homosexual privilege points and the queer privilege points that entails. So they can, be celebrated as part of the rainbow community, and as well as, you know, like looking nice, dressing nice, and accessing women.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
It's
uh
so it's a way out. Like it's a weird, convoluted ideological way out of this hole that they've been dug into.
yeah,
And it's
and
a way of achieving success.
well, they're right in the sense that they will be celebrated more.
Yeah, they will be. Yeah.
They'll be on the ABC as Stunning and Brave
Mm,
instead of being at risk of getting out a gun and shooting everyone in the supermarket. It's a nicer way to be seen, except the turfs. The only problem is the turfs. We don't like them either way.
we keep saying no.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you get this sort of cohort of kind of late teens, mid 20s men who transition, you
Hmm.
know, and I think we can all probably think of one or two off the top of our heads that, they didn't quite, couldn't quite hack it as in the male world, and some of them were even quite good-looking young men.
Come on. Come on. Give us a name.
I'm thinking of Katie Montgomery off the top of my head,
Yes. Yeah,
and
he's a nice looking man, wasn't he?
yeah, right, yeah,
Yeah.
like he's some sort of rejection, and but
Hmm.
he's come back
But
as a female, as a
he's
quote
gay though.
unquote female.
Yeah. He's gay though.
Well, that's
Because
that's
he's
fine.
often in the
Yeah.
DMs of the gay guys,
So
telling them that he's getting more than they are because
mm,
he's so good looking, and he pretends he often had inbox conversations with my friend Brett, um and he would tell him that he was going on a date and the man had no idea that he was completely invested in this idea that he passes,
yeah.
um which when you hear him speak, I mean, anyone can put a filter. I can put a filter on and make myself look 25. But if you meet me in
Yeah.
person, you'll know that I'm not 25.
Well, it is like they're not exclusively heterosexual either. So for some of them, like it
Hmm,
is a route into homosexuality.
that's right, yeah. Well, some of
Yeah.
it's internal homophobia. The trans maxers, I think some of them, um, you can tell in their hatred of women. It doesn't cure their hatred of women, does it?
It's me
Um,
too. Well, again, like women are still the enemy in this calculation. Like
hmm,
it's the women who say no to them. It's the women who deny them access to the
uh,
female toilets. Um,
and as
it's
much as even the
yeah,
most friendly women, trans friendly women would be, they don't necessarily want to have sex with them. I mean, your politics, you might do performative politics where you say, oh, yeah, come in the bathroom with me. But taking them home would be another level. Most women are still attracted, most heterosexual women, is the controversial thing, are still attracted to masculine men. I mean, they don't have to be super masculine, but it's nice if they wear trousers and a t-shirt, or it does. I've talked to a lot of women over a lot of years, and even
yeah.
if they fall in love with a guy who's not, Denzel Washington, I think I mentioned before. Um, they they will say, I love the way he smiles, or I love the way he dresses. He's got a really good fashion sense. Women find that really attractive, or he's funny.
Mm.
Um, there's a whole range of things that women find attractive in men. Um, and that they're men. That he's a man. He dresses really well. His ass looks nice in a pair of jeans. Um, just little things. Usually not he's wearing frilly knickers and he's confused about his identity. That's not very attractive. And lesbians, they might say, these sort of publicly funded lesbians might say that they find them attractive, but no genuine lesbian I've ever spoken to. I probably meet the wrong ones.
Well, yeah, like I think for a lot of these, a lot of guys, like in the transmaxing, I think ContraPoints actually, it's like a really famous YouTuber. He in his videos called Lesbians, but he takes this excruciating tour about how he thought he was gay, and then he, became a woman, and he wanted to be a lesbian, and then da 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 da, and then he oh no, wait, so he thought he was gay, then he became a woman, and he thought he was straight, and then what happened was that he realized that he was really a lesbian, and he's been a lesbian this whole time, because he found someone who was like just, rocked his world, who was a woman. And the spoiler alert is it's a trans woman. So he's just taken like the long way around being gay.
Okay,
But
yeah.
now he's a lesbian, right?
And they're both
Because he's,
lesbians.
but
That's
they're
like
both
they're both men.
lesbians.
Yeah.
So
And Riley J. Dennis is another one. I mean,
like,
reasonably good looking man. Riley J. Dennis, but
yeah, yeah,
okay.
he's looked all
Certainly,
right. Yeah.
yeah. Certainly wouldn't think that he would be rejected, but yeah, absolute creep of a man.
Because they
Misogynist.
again, like it's all about this power and labels, and there are some labels that are okay to have,
Yeah,
like straight white cis man is not one of them,
yeah,
or straight white cis man who's not successful with women is not one of
yeah.
them. And let's face it, no man starts successful with women. You've got to employ strategies. You've got to like work it out. You've got to try, and you've got to be rejected a lot, and then you figure it out.
They make out as if it's so
um
hard to be a man. I mean, honestly, I don't want to sound like a hard-ass feminist. I know you have a son. I don't have a son that's probably coming out. But it's not that hard to be a man. I mean, honestly, you got
well,
all the stuff. You don't have periods. You don't have to go to work and suffer through periods. You don't have to worry about pregnancy.
no,
You know, you got
it's
a lot going for you, really. The whole, gender balance.
and they don't have
You know,
hormonal swings. Like that's a big thing.
yeah,
They don't
like
have,
we're supposed to have
yeah.
this great sympathy for the poor man, and I know they have high suicide and mental illness is a scourge. I do have sympathy for mentally ill people, but I do not accept really that life is harder in the Western world for men than it is for women. Life's a struggle.
And that's why I think the incel thing, like it's like the trans thing. It seems so insane.
Mm.
It's such a like a self-contradictory thing to kind of get your head around.
Yeah.
And part of it is because life's so good, right?
Mm.
And if you can't succeed with all of these advantages, if you don't feel like a success, um, you know, possibly because you're a teenager and you're going through a tumultuous, virtual, vulnerable time,
Yeah.
if you don't feel like you're a success, even with all of these advantages, well, you must be failure. You
Yeah.
must be like substandard. Or if you're a short man and like, or you're not that attractive, you're a bit of a funny looking kid, or you get picked last, or you're not top of the class, or you're kind of just all around a little bit average. Um, just like we recognize that, you know, magazine images of supermodels are harmful for girls, or can be harmful for girls to view these images of like, you know, supermodels who look impossibly thin, who look very masculine, actually.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard. It is also harmful, I think, for boys growing up to have unrealistic ideas of what it is to be a man, to be a masculine man, to be successful as
That's
a
right.
man.
Yeah. And I'm all in favor of the
Yeah,
diversity of roles. Same men, same women, women being powerful men. But but we still have to acknowledge that men sometimes do get threatened by women's success. Um, and I see that in the Christian world, and it comes out in the strangest ways. I've told you, I went down a rabbit hole of Christian women who do these crafty things and run these businesses, and some of them become extremely successful. So you got Mary Lou in there making her stuff on her cricket. And she's got like 1 million subscribers on YouTube. She's making this stuff and she's killing it. She's employing people. And she's still speaking in this little voice. Oh, and we cut these out. And she's wearing an apron and she's doing the
yeah.
thing.
And she's talking
Um,
about how she's like deferential and she's going to make her husband's dinner and everything, but she's a
yeah,
multimillionaire,
she's killing
right?
it. He's probably working
It's
at
like,
Coles. And they get threatened by it,
yeah, yeah,
and they got to stop that too. We've got to be able to criticize it. We've got to be open to criticize both masculine and feminine stereotypes, um, because they hold us back, and they're
yeah.
dangerous. They are dangerous.
Yeah, they
So,
are. They are. Yeah. And that's, really at the end of it, we need to kind of get real a little bit, especially when it comes to adolescence. Um, and again, that was the thing that kind of ran through this series on Netflix is like there's that generational shift of what were the parents doing when they were 13? Oh, they were going to dances and they were making idiots of themselves, and they were finding out that the opposite sex are just idiots like they are. They're just
yeah,
human. And
boys
what
are
are
putting their
kids?
hands up girls' shirts.
Yeah. And um like what are kids these days doing? Or they're online, they're on Instagram, they're on their phones, they're on their computer, like they're in their room on their computer,
Mm.
hours a day, hours a night. And they're getting bullied in these like really strange, ornate, and highly intellectual ways
Yeah.
that use this coded language that outsiders can't decipher.
Mm.
And there's
Which the
like,
son brings in, right? The son says to the father, "Dad,
yeah, oh,
you're
you're
making a
getting it
fool
all
of
wrong.
yourself." Yeah.
Yeah. All of these things, you can't read this language. This is like hieroglyphics that have a special
Yeah.
meaning to us.
And the father represented, he's good looking, he's a copper, which is a very masculine sort of job. He's competent, but he's a pretty turns out not a great father. And the son's a little bit awkward, and they try and negotiate that sort of dynamic, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, they do. I found it was very descriptive and it didn't have a lot of like judgments or conclusions. So yeah, it just like described what the different players are doing in the situation.
Yeah. Well,
And
it took it from
took
the perspective
yeah,
of the person, the murderer, rather than the victim, which
yeah.
that's unusual for us, right? We don't normally see that. That's obviously a deliberate choice. We didn't see the victim's parents. We
Mm,
didn't hear about, and we saw the
the
best
impact.
friend who was
Yeah.
devastated, but that's the only person we saw really from the
But
victim's perspective.
what it
We saw the problem.
what it really was a catalogue of the behaviors that young men encounter, and that and it was also a catalogue of the strategies that women use to deal with problematic men.
Yeah.
And that's really what like I got out of the series. So, there's the teacher who's very quiet voiced and
Mm.
obsequious, and you do whatever you want, sweetheart, and infantilizes the children, infantilizes everyone. Then there's the mother who's just caring and accepting and soft and has no
Mm.
boundaries and no edge. Um, and the psychologist who kind of uses these strategies to try to elicit responses. And
Yeah.
she's the quote dishonest woman. She's the strategic woman that
Mm.
these young men encounter. Um,
Yeah.
and how none of it kind of really adds up to a real engagement with another human being.
Mm.
And,
Yeah.
I found it
Well,
very
I think
sad.
that's the contrast with the generations, like parents, my
Yeah.
generation. The actor's probably a little bit younger than me, but or maybe not. But because the mother, she talks about aha.
Yeah.
That was the first concert I ever went to. That it's a great embarrassment to me. My cousin used to buy me these tickets to go, and we used to go out. My cousin Nikki, we used to go out. Just about everyone that came to Brisbane, she'd have tickets to, and she'd make me go. And sometimes they weren't my choice, and I was never really into aha. But I had tickets. She bought me tickets, so I went. And so that was the first concert. I think I was 14 that I ever went to. So that made me a little bit embarrassed.
That's funny.
Because I still find their music difficult to listen to. Um, so they talk about the generation divide between us and the younger generation who are coming through and who are more online. The father was a plumber,
Mm.
he's clueless,
Manly, doing
didn't
something
know.
useful.
That's
Yeah.
right. Had a little bit of aggression issue, but generally a good man. And you know, I think you could say that they're trying to tell parents to be more aware, and that's true. But sometimes kids are, I told you before about a situation at high school, sorry, a school that my children were at, um, and one of the girls had been raped by a boy at another school, private school, that was in the news. Um, and I knew a woman who knew the boy. And there was a story there that years and years I've been trying to get him help. He had been showing antisocial behavior pretty much his whole life. And then he's ended up doing this terrible thing to this girl. And it was the first time I thought to myself, how would you feel? You know,
Yeah.
if your child that you nurtured and loved your whole life had done this horrible thing and violated another person in this terrible way. And it reminded me of that situation. It's a question, they're interesting questions that you have to think about because we kind of assume that kids that do that stuff are pretty
Not
trash
bad
from
kids.
pretty trash
Yeah.
families. Yeah, but they're not necessarily.
Sometimes it's something that you just have to, like, there's these things come out of nowhere. And
Yeah.
um and I think that's where, like dealing with it, it's walking that line between like empathizing but not sympathizing, like
Mm.
humanizing but not condoning, um,
Asking what the
like
social contract is.
understanding but
Mm.
not like endorsing.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah. And
and with like the moral panic like doesn't help. And dollars to donuts, like ABC, when they approach it, they will come out with a moral panic about, oh my God, boys are doing this stuff online.
yeah,
Help. We need to problematize the boys. We need to stop them
yeah.
from doing this. Um,
ABC always put themselves as the moral superior
they
arbiter,
are.
don't they? Doesn't matter what the situation is, they've got the answer, they know the thing. And they're the least likely people to know any, be aware of anything. They live in a complete fantasy world where they insist that people pretend that men can turn into women with words, and
Well,
that those men are completely devoid of male pattern violence.
well, they're the ones who are, again, like they're even today they've come out with, a moral panic about how you know, there are some male players in the AFL who
Oh,
are terrified that they won't be
Taylor,
able to play women's sports anymore.
Taylor with a
So
Y and an
they
H.
just, yeah,
These guys just take on a
and it just
man,
looks like
sometimes just respell their name wrong.
they just love, no, they're just tragic.
Trans Aussie
I
rule
want,
player terrified
I
her
want my
right
eight
to
cents
play could be
back.
taken away because they're frightened that the Trump stuff's going to come here, and we're hoping
And
that the Trump
it's,
stuff's going to come here.
but that's where, this whole, the transmaxing, it's so attractive, right?
Yeah.
Because it naturalizes this hatred of women
Yeah.
because, you're like, as an incel, you're a problem, but
Mm.
as a trans woman, you're glorified. And they're
And I'll put
right
that
in that
picture up
sense that
of that
as a
bloke too.
woman, they're treated better.
They are. Well, you look
They're
at him.
not because they're women, but because they're men.
He's male in every way. He's got long hair, but you even chop up from his face is male anyways. If you
It's
put your
very,
hand
very
over his face,
masculine.
that's a male body. Look, his ass, he's got a little masculine ass. The whole thing about his body is male. He's obviously had a little bit of tea skittles. His boobs are growing a little bit there,
Yeah,
but he absolutely is a man. Um, and they're gaslighting us as usual. And they put
yeah.
it up. ABC Sport, I commented on ABC Sport. I wasn't probably that nice. It's now got 60 retweets. A turn of comments, 2 likes and 60 retweets, which are all people saying pretty much stick it
No.
up your ass. There's another, it's ABC Sport. I looked at their site. There's another story about a gay man who's come out in the soccer, professional soccer player in South Australia. No, the comments are on. There's 2 comments saying, no one should hate on the gays. There's a couple of likes. It was almost unnoticed. And of course they know that gay and trans are different. They know that people don't like it. They know that people don't accept that humans can change sex. And yet they keep pushing it out. And it's either they got defund it or we're gonna end up with a Trump. They hate the Trump, but what do you think is going to produce him?
Well, yeah. I mean, it comes back to if you keep on being corrupt, then someone who's tries to reform the institution will just come to the conclusion that it can't be reformed.
Yeah.
So they've got to, unless they moderate, they will lose, and they will lose big time.
Well, someone did make the comment last week that they've obviously been watching our little debate about me saying defund them and you saying, "Oh, not yet, not yet." That you're inching closer every week to
I
defund
am.
the ABC.
I just want my 8 cents back. That's all. No, honestly, look, my plan, when I am the supreme ruler of Australia,
Yes,
um, I think that any of
Godspeed the day.
any of these institutions that have become really, really woke, we need to, like, the first step is we need to take them out of Ultimo and put them in Penrith or,
Yeah,
somewhere, or Dubbo or wherever
like
it
in
is,
city here. Yeah,
take them out of the cool inner city area. And that's the
yeah,
first step. And you will see an attrition.
yeah,
You'll see an attrition of activists because they don't want to be in Penrith. They
yeah,
want to be in Ultimo.
yeah.
And it's going to be very natural. I don't think you'll have to fire anyone at the
No.
first step. It will change the culture really dramatically. Just take them out of the cool inner city bubble where no one challenges their views and where they can pretend that everybody agrees with them.
And remove them from the AWEI and
Well, I mean, there was
remove
that too.
Acon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I Someone said this week about how, they get these theories, not just incels, but just the guys who are men, about how women dominate the politics, women vote Democrat, women dominate. This guy said to women dominate the administrative structures. The fact is, women do well in administrative structures. They do well in bureaucracy. They have it's a good orderly life for them. Their regular hours, the money's good.
The work-life balance. Yeah.
That's right. They've got a very suitable temperament to be in an office environment all day, every day. They understand the rules. They get up the structure. They climb the structure very easily. Um, that's just what women are good at. So it doesn't mean that there's a plot, there's a conspiracy. I love these conspiracy theories that we're all getting together in our women groups and we're working out how to take over
They
the
should they should
the
never have given
structure
us the vote.
so that
That was
so
the
that men can get
mistake.
into women's bathrooms. How are we going to do it? How are we going to get those men into our bathrooms? I just really want them to come in and piss on the seat. This is I won't be free. My world won't be free until every man can come into a women's bathroom and make it equally as disgusting as the men's bathrooms are.
Until we have that gender neutral bathrooms.
Oh,
That's the, yeah.
yes, please, Jesus.
Um, yeah. So I don't know, conclusions about incels.
They're bad.
They're bad, yeah. Um,
The
I
men
think
should
that
sort them out.
I think that yeah, look, it's not too late to treat boys like they're humans and to
Yeah.
give them like male role models. And
And
if there is
we're not the ones
yeah.
pushing them out of masculinity. Like, let's just be
No.
honest about it. Like, they blame women not for everything, but we're not the ones that is putting them out of the monkey community. You know,
Well,
if
just like women regulate female behavior,
mm,
men regulate male behavior. Like,
yeah, they need mentors. They need kindness. You know, my husband's not a big macho bloke. He likes cooking. Um, he's a sensitive man. I made a little joke the other day. We went to a place where there's some Lebanese women. He was in talking with the women. He's always talking with the women. Loves the Lebanese women. Loves to, you know, when his brother died, they had it at the funeral at a mosque. And they separate the men from the women in the mosque. And he went and sat with the women. He's not a man who, likes to push his chest out, but he's still a man. I don't think I've ever seen him insecure about his masculinity. There's ways to teach boys to just accept themselves as they are, um, and to be patient, through adolescence, particularly, and be respectful to women.
I think that also there's I think we need to slow down adolescence a little bit. Like there, we slow down the age that kids get online, slow down the age kids get a phone. Um, and there's no like adolescence feels like a very pressured time. You do feel like everything's urgent. And
Yeah.
it's sort of urgent enough without putting all of this other social pressure to be a perfect man or be a perfect woman on top of it.
Mm.
And you do see that these days with like when I was 12, we experimented with hair and makeup a little bit. Like, we wore a fancy outfit, like, once a year or something. But these days you look at a group of 12-year-olds and they're all perfectly airbrushed and they have midriff tops and they look identical and they look like mature women. We could
Yeah.
slow this down. There's no reason for girls or boys to be matured so quickly and to be sorted so quickly.
We weren't allowed to wear makeup. It was
No.
it was considered, even when that young girl, that beauty
Yeah.
queen girl, Jim, what was her name? Some French name, um, was murdered. Everyone was horrified to see a
Oh,
little
Jean
girl with
Bonnet. Yeah.
Ramsey. Yeah, all the
Yeah.
makeup on her. It was considered really inappropriate to
It's
put makeup
horrifying.
on
Yeah.
children and to make children look sexualized.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
But yeah, I honestly think that there is room to sort of slow that down and to take some of that pressure off. And um I'm a big believer in getting outdoors, like
yeah,
having time with older adults, like who
yeah,
can just sort of, whether that's through community groups or scouts or,
yeah.
friends and family,
They do that in the
getting
church quite a
outside.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah. And they get criticized because, and there does, there is safeguarding risks. There's
yeah,
safeguarding risks from leaving your house. And so we try and make it better. One of the things we do is we try and keep the men with the men and the women with the women. That's a safeguarding principle. And the boys, mentoring is big in the church. The boys go on special camps and the girls go on particular camps. They go on them together as well. I know the scripture union camps used to be massive. I don't know if they're still big. Um, and they do activities together, but the dorms, of course, are separate. Um, it's just a normal thing to do. You can't just, stop children going to church or going to community activities. There's
And if
so
you
much
do, like, what are
demonization
you
of it,
what are you replacing it with? Like that's kind of the,
with
I
the
think
ABC teaching us about sex.
it's like it's just as harmful as them getting on the manosphere and
It
like
is.
hearing it's just still it's harmful
Mm,
ideology both
yeah.
ways. Yeah. All right.
All right, we're done.
I think we're done. And I want to thank everyone for sticking with us and joining us again on the Dollhouse this week. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. We are on Spotify and YouTube, and our show notes are on Substack. I'm Kit Kowalski. I'm here with Edie Wyatt, and we'll be back next week.
Cheers, guys. Bye bye.
Bye.